Man who speaks more sense than anybody I know is always on the show. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer with Spiked. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
Well, it's just been another week of brilliance and hell and all sorts of different things. I'm going to start slightly differently if I can. I'm not going to start with Starmer and Richard III, Rachel Reeves. I'm going to do that in a bit. I'm going to talk about the death penalty. I want to start with this story that first rose to prominence a couple of days ago when we were told that the woke Royal Navy had decided to rename their latest attack submarine HMS Achilles, but that had been dubbed unfair. It might, in fact, upset the French. So the Navy were deciding to call it HMS Achilles. Loads of people, quite rightly, walking around going, this is woke bleeding nonsense. I mean, for goodness sake, this is ludicrous. News today that King Charles got involved, our woke king, they're saying here, and it was he who raised this again when Labour came in. Thoughts on that, Brendan?
It's terrifying, I think. It's really scary that we possibly now have a woke king, you know, the king of wokeness, Charles III. It's awful. It makes you miss the Queen even more. The Queen would never have done anything stupid and woke like this. I think it's the most bizarre idea that the calling a submarine Agincourt would really tick off the French that much. I mean, the French know their history as well as we do. They know that we beat them in the Battle of Agincourt in the 100 Years' War, and that they beat us about 20 or 30 years later. You know, it was a lot of to and fro in the 1400s, and people know that. They're not babies. They can cope with being reminded of the battles of history. Also, let's remind ourselves that the French are not shy about celebrating war when they need to. Their national anthem, which, by the way, I love, has that infamous line, we must, you know, wet the fields with blood. You know, it's a celebration of war. It's a celebration of all the conquering that they've done over the past few hundred years. So this is ridiculous. Every nation we're grown-ups. We know that wars took place in history, and King Charles, rather, should not go around changing the names of things to avoid offending other nations.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, you look at what's going on in the world, Brendan, and you think, you know, before we get into Labour, you know, rape gangs, people being murdered, immigration problems, financial hardship. And we've got a navy, presumably a government and a king, who are worried about upsetting the French with something. I mean, I'm different to you. I'd upset the French every single day. If I could get a job upsetting the French, I'd be delighted to do that on a daily basis. But to me, it's about priorities, and they're all wrong. Let me throw a couple of other things at you before we get to the main political story. Labour, in its madness, more madness, considering forcing households that only watch Netflix, Brendan. I mean, your face already. That they'll have to pay the BBC licence fee. And I said to somebody earlier, it's like these people don't listen to anybody. It's just a tax grab again.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, firstly, it's a tax grab. It's very authoritarian. It just is unworkable as far as I can see. But also, you're absolutely right. They are so out of touch with how people are feeling and how people are thinking. Because there are a lot of people out there who are really ticked off with the BBC at the moment. They think it's gone hyper woke. They think it looks down its nose at ordinary Brits. They think it became the Brexit bashing corporation during the Brexit years, which it did. So people are worried about the BBC, and many people are turning their backs on it, and they're choosing not to pay their licence fee and not to watch the BBC, and that should be their right. And for Labour to swan in and say, well, actually, if you've got a TV and you're watching anything at all, we might force you to pay the licence fee. It's a really tyrannical measure. I actually have increasingly come around to the point of view that compelling us by law to fund the BBC is a problem to begin with.
I agree.
We should not be forced under threat of criminal punishment to fund a broadcaster that is so often out of touch with how British people feel. So Labour is going to make that whole problem worse. I think one upside from Labour's stupid tax grab is that it might raise the question of the licence fee even further to the top of public discussion, and that wouldn't be a bad thing.
I agree. I mean, listen, I said it earlier, I don't know what you think, but I think in 5 years' time, terrestrial television will be a busted flush anyway. And I don't understand that it's just one corporation. And that's not because I work on a commercial station, and I worked for ITV for 15 years, and you only survived in terms of what you achieved, and then advertisers would buy their adverts on the stations and the programmes that work. But the BBC is supposed to be our state broadcaster. What it's become, you say woke, I'd say left-leaning and woke, and very opinionated and very forceful in how it sees and how it promotes things. And I think that's very, very dangerous. But to be told, you know, you have to terrestrial television will disappear. They should be subscription-based, and we should, as individuals, be able to make the free choice to say, I want to watch sport, a news channel, I'll put a kids channel on, I'll put a movie channel on, and I'll put, I don't know, a sci-fi channel on, and I'll pay 25 quid a month for those, which is still cheaper than the BBC. I don't understand it. And most of all, I think what people get offended about is the theory that you've come out with, but also the quality is rubbish. The quality of what the BBC... Yes, there are good documentaries and there are dramas, but the rest of it's rubbish. Rubbish.
Yeah, I think the license fee is untenable in the modern era. In the era of streaming, subscription-based TV channels, you know, I subscribe to, I think, 5 different TV channel streaming services now. Every month I pay 10 quid or whatever it is, and I'm very happy to because I watch a lot of stuff on them. The BBC should be one of them. I should have the choice to give the BBC 10 quid a month and then I'll watch its stuff. That's how it needs to catch up with the modern era. You know, I'm old enough to remember when there were 3 TV channels. I remember when Channel 4 came online when I was a kid, and we were like, oh my God, wow, 4 channels. Now there are thousands and thousands, and you can get them on your phone while you're on the bus going to work. It's a whole different era, and unless the BBC catches up, I think more people are going to stop paying their fee and just choose what they want to watch.
Couldn't agree more. Can we quickly, again, we will finish with Reeves and Starmer. Can we talk about the other main story today? A majority of the public, Brendan, think that the UK should bring back the death penalty with the strongest support, this is really surprising me today, amongst millennials, a poll has revealed. 3 in 5 millennials, nearly 60%, said that capital punishment should be reintroduced, with only a quarter opposed. Thoughts on that?
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I was also struck that the highest number was amongst millennials because, you know, we have this tendency, well, someone like me has this tendency, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm older. You look at millennials and Gen Z as kind of, you know, woke and pathetic, but maybe that's not the case.
Well,
maybe
Poppy Coburn made a point earlier, which I forgot to put to you, which I will now. She said, with the advent of social media and the very things that we're talking about, far more transparency, we get our news online, we get it quicker, there's figures and pictures and mobile phones and videos, maybe some of the horrific stuff by these animals, Axel Rudakubana, the people that macheted poor Lee Rigby to death in broad daylight. Maybe when you see that stuff, maybe when it's not hidden, when it's not just a court case. We're seeing trials where judges are on television putting people away for 50 years. Maybe that has created amongst this younger generation a desire for actually these scumbags to not be allowed liberty at all ever. Now, of course, you get the other argument, which is, you know, a life for life, you're not, you know, why lower yourself to that level? But I would say that when you have children, and I would think this will be the reason for the millennials, your opinion changes massively. Massively.
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this over the past few months, in fact, with following the Southport massacre, which was one of the great, terrible, awful, unspeakable crimes of our time. No question about it. I am against the death penalty for a lot of reasons. I don't want the state to have that level of power, but also I think it's a greater punishment, potentially, to force someone to live in squalor for the rest of their rotten life rather than to give them the easy way out and to allow them to pose as a martyr, which a lot of these freaks would do, and a lot of their followers would say they were martyrs if they were killed. So I'm against it for those reasons, but I've never been off the view, which you see amongst kind of Guardianistas and other kind of limousine liberals, this idea that anyone who supports the death penalty must just be a backwater idiot from some part of England where they don't know what's going on in the world. I've never subscribed to that view. When I've met people who support the death penalty, they are very intelligent. They know why they want it, and they make a convincing case. And in a democracy, maybe they will win out. So I think it's a good discussion for us to have.
I'm really interested in your analogy there, and I love that, because you're right. The backwater village idiot from somewhere in the middle of England who wants to murder people is exactly what the Democratic Party thought middle America was, and 90 million that voted for Donald Trump. Let's bring it to today. Some would say an interesting day. I would say Rachel Reeves, or Richard III, as I now call her, Brendan, because she looks like Richard III. I think, have a look at her picture, it's brilliant. I'm just calling her Richard III. I didn't really understand today. She jumps up, she talks about, I'm backing a Heathrow expansion, a 3rd runway. It's all about growth, growth, growth. We're going to turn this corridor between Oxford and Cambridge, Silicon Valley. It's AI. We're going to lead the world. We are the best. Keir Starmer stands up and says, I agree, and we're going to invoke the spirit of Margaret Thatcher, having taken down a picture. We're going to cut red tape by introducing another Quango to talk about it. When they came to power, again, Harry Cole was spot on with this earlier, I think, as he said, they spent the first few weeks saying, this is terrible. 14 years of... We're skint. It's a complete and utter disaster. They gave their mates £11 billion. They talked about the black hole again and again. The economy flatlined because it was doing all right. Then they brought in a budget that was supposed to be about growth that basically said to any businesses, small, medium and large, it's going to cost you more. We're going to screw you to the ground. Well, that's not going to incentivise me to carry on. Oh, and while we're at it, we're going to give workers' rights that are just outrageous. And I'm feeling anxious. It's a Monday. We'll have a week off. We'll pay you. They're going to do that sort of stuff as well. And so then growth didn't happen and everybody criticised the budget. And after all that misery, she stands up today and expects us all to go, oh, it's fantastic, Britain's great. No, it's not. It's on its arse, isn't it?
You know, I don't buy this pro-growth talk at all. I'm in favour of economic growth. I think we should build more. And I think we need that third runway, which, by the way, we've been talking about for decades and no one's done anything about.
We might need it, but it'd take us 20 years to get planning, wouldn't it?
Well, that's right. It will take ages to get planning, and then there'll be loads of health and safety regulations and red tape, as Keir Starmer has suddenly discovered, that will make it even harder to build. You know, in the time that we've been discussing one measly extra runway at Heathrow, China has built about 50 or 100 new airports. China is building airports all the time, and we can't even add an extra runway. So we do need growth, but I don't buy it from this government. I don't buy that they are going to slash all that red tape, and I don't buy that they are going to turn to growth. This is a government that is addicted to bureaucracy.
Yes.
Addicted to
Did you know they've added thousands of civil servants since they came to power 8 months ago?
Yeah, so they just keep adding layer upon layer of box-checking bureaucracy, which makes everything harder. Also, they are completely beholden to the net zero religion, whatever they might say. These are the kind of politicians who bow down to that prophetess of doom, Greta Thunberg, who made excuses for the death cult of Extinction Rebellion, who said that we're going to go to hell in a handcart, as the whole human species will go to hell in a handcart unless we slash our carbon emissions to zero by 2030. I don't believe they've had a Damascene conversion from that religion to the policy.
Well, this is really interesting because it was the thing I wanted to bring up with you. So there she is making her announcement, Brendan, and Starmer's sort of, you know, backing it up. But the head of the energy department, you know, Ed Miliband, that I think one of the scariest men ever, and I'm being completely serious, nowhere to be seen. At the same time, Sir Sadiq, don't start me, he says, and I quote, I will resist the plan with all my might because this will have a severe impact on noise, air pollution and meeting our climate change targets. So immediately you can see, on the one hand, to try and create the growth they've promised the people that voted for them, they're going to have to go against their Green mates who are going to dig their heels in. All those mayors, Burnham will be next, you watch, it'll happen. Where does that leave us as a country? Just a mess, man. Just a mess. Just a mess.
Exactly right. They're not even going to get it past their own colleagues in the Labour Party. I had to laugh when I heard the pipsqueak mayor of London talking about all my might, as if he's going to, you know, take his sword out and slash down.
No, probably be a zombie knife because he's probably. I can't. And I get people think I'm being really unfair. I can't have him in a million years, but a very outspoken comment. I blame Londoners. Only 1 million people out of 12 million voted, and he got back in for another 4 years. He should have come out of your houses and voted Sadiq Khan out. I find it astonishing, though, because you've got that Green lobby. And, you know, I'm desperate to interview, you know, I'd love to interview Miliband and just basically say this to him. So your tractor tax is to take away lands so that you can grab it, build your wind farms, which you technically know don't create enough electricity. So what you're saying to the British public is, in the quest for being green and doing the right thing, you'll have to import electricity from another country and our bills will go up and we can't, well, ours is the most expensive electricity already. How do you justify that? Wouldn't be able to answer the question.
You know, I completely agree with you on Ed Miliband. He terrifies me because he has got that look in his eye of a religious convert to the core
cult
environmentalism, you know, the death cult of climate change hysteria, which is this modern day cultish religion which has convinced itself that the world is ending and we must all atone for the sins of modernity. That is what these people believe. And the idea that any party, any government that's got Ed Miliband in it, or any party that has got Sadiq Khan in it, is going to be able to do all these things that would actually benefit working people, create jobs and create growth, I just don't believe it. And when Starmer evokes the spirit of Margaret Thatcher, that's when you know they're talking nonsense, because there is no way this technocratic grey dweeb is going to embody the spirit of Thatcher, who really did slash things and really did make growth a possibility. It's just not going to happen.
Technocratic grey dweeb has to be my favourite phrase ever. The other thing about Miliband that I find astonishing is that they all have these great values, but the British public, I mean, somebody rang up earlier, let me take on this very quickly before we finished, and said, the problem for the Labour Party is they promised so many things to so many people before they got in that nothing, it's all reactive now. It's not proactive. There doesn't appear to be a plan. This quest with the green energy thing, if they told the British people, or if the Tories had been in a better position where they told the British people that the truth is that your electricity, whilst they quest to be seen as grey. I mean, what happened the other day? Did you see it? I want President Trump to know, said that grey technocratic, oh, not the dweeb, the other one, Miliband. The net zero strike is unstoppable. And Trump just went, well, I stopped it 10 minutes ago. When he stood up, I don't know if you saw the footage, he went, we're leaving the Paris Accord. He said, they told us 12 years ago the world was ended, but we're still here, so we're leaving it. And, I mean, we laugh, but the guy gets more done in 5 minutes. I fear for our country, but I do think one thing, mate, to sum up, really, I don't think after the next 4 years I don't think they'll be back for years and years. I think people will absolutely realise what socialism in its purest form is about and what it does to a country.
I think they're in massive trouble when they leave office, which can't come soon enough in my view, because they've just done a terrible job. And as one of your callers said, we're only an eighth of the way through. But, you know, you're right to raise Trump in this discussion, because what Trump has done over the past couple of weeks is extraordinary. You know, when he has destroyed the net zero religion, he said, drill, baby, drill. Let's bring up all that liquid gold and make a cheaper, more abundant energy. He dismantled the gender ideology. He got rid of identity politics from all the federal government workplaces, and he said he's going to control his border. With one fell swoop, he has dismantled the ruling class ideology of wokeness. And we have a government here tripping in his shadow, slagging him off, saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, not realising that that's what ordinary people want their leaders to do. And
you know, the one thing as well from this week, and this will be the last thing, is somebody rang the show yesterday and said the problem that we can't do anything about, as a politician, I don't know, the reason we can't do anything about our borders and we can't be forceful and we can't be like Trump is because the blob, you know, the civil servants are unsackable, which to me is just, I can't even have this heinous thing to say to me. And what did Trump do? I'm going to do immigration. And then yesterday it transpired that a few hundred working in the government facilities to deal with immigration disagree with him. So he sacked them. Brilliant. Honestly, why the hell can't we have politicians with that vigour, with that conviction, who don't care if they lose their seat? They put themselves in front of the British public and they say, that's what I believe, come with me on the ride, and if you vote me out, I'm gone, but I'm doing it warts and all. That's it.
You know, that is so true, because even if we had a good government, which we don't, the blob is always going to be a problem. That Whitehall monstrosity, which just constantly holds things back and checks boxes and ticks boxes and says, no, you can't do that. Computer says no. That's the attitude of our civil service. Computer says no. They say it to everything. And especially if the Tories in power, especially if it's Boris Johnson saying, let's get Brexit done, they try to stall that for years and years because they are undemocratic as well as really bureaucratic. So we have to do something about the blob. We will never fix the problems in this country unless we clear out a huge amount of the civil service which is holding this country back.
So good to have you on. Thank you, Brendan. Have a great week. He's always with us on a Wednesday at 6. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer of Spike. What do you make of what he said?